Right, well, thanks for coming. My name is Pete Logan, and I'm going to go through not so much the mechanics of thermal flying. We're going to concentrate more on the big picture of how do you put a decent flight together, particularly going from the Dales. Is that a tall order? And if it is, what are the tools you need to do it? We're going to go through breaking down into chunks what you need in your head and what you need to know about that you're going to encounter on a flight as it goes out. It's kind of a no-frills approach, so we're not going to rat hole on tremendous amount of detail, because staying in the air, flying 100k, I'm going to argue is quite easy. But what I wanted to sort of tackle first is, why have we got this stupid thing of talking about 100k like it's a thing? It's an arbitrary distance. You know, it could be 28,000 ironing boards of distance. It doesn't matter. So, you know, I think in order to do some of the things that you're going to need to do, stay in the air for a number of hours, fly on your own, make your own decisions, you're going to need to know kind of why you're doing it. And maybe it's not actually, you know, 100k, but it does represent a personal best. It does represent you learning as, you know, as an animal that is designed to learn. And I think that's what drives me forward for trying to fly bigger distances and fly further and fly from new sites and fly routes that I've not flown before. It's because I've not seen that land before. It's because I've not worked out, you know, where are my hillsides that are going to be particularly good for getting the next climb. So for me, it's kind of an exploratory sort of thing. For other people, it might be a mark of craftsmanship, of achievement, of, you know, some self-affirmation that I'm able to do this and I'm able to make steps onwards. And that's, you know, that's fine, that's achievement. It's maybe nothing to brag about, but it is something to, you know, to draw confidence from. But first of all, you know, what are we taking on? And I just put a bit of data together here. This is from last year. Perhaps somebody else who should be on my brains trust is Chris Kay, featuring at the top of the table there. And you'll notice, you know, going from red in the top left to blue down at the bottom right, you know, we've got a spread of distances, and we've got quite a number of people. I think we had overall 20 flights in the 100k region. We very consistently in 2023, although people think the years were different, we had 19 cross-country flights in 2023. So that's not a huge number of 100k plus flights. But what was interesting was that it was on 7 days and 5 days in 2023. So first thing is, there are not that many days in the season where 100k flights are done from the Dales. Now I'm not thinking for a moment that we're like the Derbyshire Soaring Club. We haven't got enough members to ensure that every day that's possible to have a 100k flight in the Dales is actually flown. So I'm sure that we're missing some days there, just because the hardcore of people don't go out and fly every one of those days where you could squeak over 90, 95, 100. But it does show you that the number of days is limited. what I want you to take away from this is that the number of people who fly 100k on any day that it's possible to fly that distance, that's not limited. The air's a big place. There's a number of people go a cross-country flight of some distance on these days. So it's not limited for any one individual to do 100k. That's open. The other thing that you've got to take note from this is if there are 7 days for the big flights from the Dales in any one season, you've got to be available for those days. There's going to be a lot of middling days, a lot of days where the base is only at 3,500, where the wind's a little bit too strong and the thermals are all torn and you're limited for distance as soon as you get out of the Dales there.
Can I just say something there, Pete, about, like, it's really important to get out on the good days, but if you're not also getting out on the quite good or the average days, you're just not building the skill set you'll need to make the most of the good day, like the awesome days. So all those people there have been out on hundreds of days when it wasn't that good, when it was only all right.
Yep.
And that's how you learn, to thermal properly.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Jeff Crossley, Rob Stenhouse, cracking flyers, but they're quite happy to put in a 10, a 14 and an 18. Of course, there's always an exception that's a Spaniard in the works. There's, David Smart there just went out on the 2 days and made them count. Okay. No limit on who can do 100k on any day that's capable of giving you 100k. Super important, but you've got to be available for it. So, is it a hard thing to do? And I'm going to equivocate here because that means I get to talk more, and that's good. So it's not hard. Okay, so the bare maths works out that for the amount of wind that the Dales gets, maybe you're getting 20k over the ground, maybe a bit less, 10k, even with a lower amount of wind speed, like 10k, then 100k equates to 4 hours in the air, so long as you spend a third of it gliding. And when you're gliding, maybe you're doing 55 kilometers an hour. No great shakes there. That's just totally average. And you'll do 73 kilometers of distance that way. Climbing, you'll spend 2/3 of your time climbing. And that's just something that as a lower airtime pilot, you just spend more time climbing. You'll have more climbs than other people who've got more experience and are going to take the risks to fly faster and fly further from each one of their thermal tops, from each one of their cloud bases. So even when you're climbing and spending 2/3 of the time climbing, you're going to do 27k just being pushed by the wind because the thermal's just being pushed by the wind. Raptors have really tiny brains. They can't afford the weight of a big brain. And admittedly, they've got a glide ratio 10, 12 to 1 for a buzzard or a kite. But they've been doing it from birth. Okay? But they've been doing it from birth with a brain that is about your thumb.
They can flap.
Okay. They can flap. Okay. And of course they've got quite a bit of control over their wings. They can bring them in when they really need to get to somewhere where the next climb is. We don't have as much freedom, but they do all of that with tiny brains. Insects just get hoovered up in a thermal. And then for the ones that land before the coast, I guess it's all right, they've done their 100k. I'm a bit of a geek.
Really?
Yes! Who'd have thought? So Autopilot SOAR is software that will run on a piece of silicon that could also quite equally run your microwave. Might be a little bit overpowered for what a microwave does, but pretty sure every chip that's put in a microwave is overpowered for that these days. But Autopilot SOAR will stay in the air all day if there's enough air to soar in. It will soar within bounds that you set it, or you can just set it off quite illegally to go and fly in any area that you want it to. And it will try and find lift. If it doesn't ever find lift, then it will go and land itself. But the aircraft can be anything. So the aircraft could be a quadcopter, cheating. It could be an unpowered polystyrene 2-metre sailplane. So we've gone from the no, it's not hard, because a buzzard with a brain the size of a thumb can do it, to yes, it's actually quite hard. Jake was, had this kind of theory that putting a long flight together is just putting some sections together, one after the other. And there's a probability with your skill set, with the conditions of the day, that you'll get one section done, and then another.
Yeah, so, and what the data suggests is that you only have to get a little bit better at finding your next thermal, and the chances of you managing to find 10 thermals in a row massively increases. So basically, the basic theory is that you only need to get slightly better, and you might maybe get 5% better at finding the next thermal, but it makes the longer flights maybe twice or 3 times as likely to happen. So small changes in your performance will make massive differences to the probability you'll do 100k. So even like a really good pilot probably isn't going to make 100k from the Dales, even on a 5-star day. There's so many. There's a lot of there is a bit of randomness to it. You don't always find that next climb. But a good pilot, also that chart, you can basically go, well, if you had a 90% chance of making your next.
So the factor 0.9 or 90% chance of making the next 10k.
Yeah, then 40%, 39% of the time, if it was as simple as that, you would make it 4 times out of 10. Whereas if you only had an 80% chance of making each climb, that number goes down to 13%.
13%.
So you can go from 13% to 40%, which is a massive difference, as in the likelihood of you making 100k. And I think that rings true really. That's what I notice because on a good day, an average pilot can make 100k absolutely fine, and a really good pilot can not make 100k. It's not guaranteed. There's a lot of randomness to it. So so basically my point was really to Pete in this was, if you want to fly 100k, you want to try and get better, but you also want to try flying it many, many times. So if you only go out 4 or 5 times a year, you're probably not going to do it. But if you try 20 times, you probably will do it, Yeah.
So you can see going from, I've got an 80% chance that I'll fly the next 10k with my skills and with the luck of the day, with the conditions the day gave you at the time that you're doing it. So at 80%, only 13% chance of getting a 100k flight in, which means, or 13 to 15%, which means that if you flew every good day that the Dales had, every 100k day, you do one of those 100Ks. If the numbers just worked out like that. Whereas if you were flying at 0.9, you're in that 39%. You'll do 300Ks.
So
For only a 10% difference in skill and luck. So, again, it is hard because you need that amount of experience. To have built up enough experience to know, is that something going off to my right hand side? What does it feel like? Should I stick with this one, or should I go on to the next climb? Should I stay with this person, or should I go with that person over this landscape or that landscape? And these choices are going to be presented to you every few kilometres. So you need a lot of experience to be making the right decisions every few kilometres and sticking with that, or working out whether you're on a hiding to nothing and going and finding something else. That was the NURB side, because there is a lot of frustration on the way. And I have to say, it's one of the reasons that David May and I originally set up this kind of loose 10 to 100 collective, and we do sessions, we share tips. It's because there's probably quite an attrition rate of people who start flying and then going cross country, and after a thermal and a half, something you knew was there but you didn't manage to take advantage of it, and then you're on the ground and you're looking at a bunch of people flying above you. It's tremendously frustrating, and I went through that from 2002, 2003, probably until about 2008-9, where I think my head was in a better place. What satisfies me is when I've been able to take what the day's given me and use it well.
Why not make it 200? Are we just chasing figures for the sake of chasing figures? It's like when you modify a vehicle or something.
Yeah.
You start souping it up, and then I got to this mark. I want to get to the next Centurion, brake horsepower.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, you spend so much.
And then you spend so much time maintaining it, starting it. I had that with the Triumph Bonneville, and then I sold it last year. And that was a beautiful moment.
Yeah. but isn't it, because these targets are set, it's then taken away the fact that you're trying to achieve something.
That's why I think it early on, 100k is an arbitrary distance, but I think it's important that people have it clear in their heads why they're doing this, because then they're thinking, what am I going to get out of it? And kind of realising that helped me that, when I'd landed out, when I'd had a day that I kind of regarded as being a bit disappointing, flipping it around, what is still good to get out of the day? Meet some random strangers, be lucky catching a bus, stop at a pub, have a decent pint of beer, but also spend that time looking at the sky. How did it develop after I landed? Not fixating on who's coming over your head and how far they're going to fly and how much of a better day that they've already bagged. That's kind of a possession thing. Turn it into a learning thing where you've got a set of conditions, you've found yourself on the ground. How did that happen? What can I change to make sure that doesn't happen again? So I'm not going to over-egg weather forecasting because you can join the crowd. We've got the message boards, we've got RASP, we've got Windy, we've got Meteor Blue. The tools are out there to tell you that there is a good quality day. But every one of these days, arguably not so much for the southerlies, had a heck of a lot of red going on there. So, you know, tool one, if rasp has a lot of red on it, that's a good thing. So we see here Hawkswick, so we go from Hawkswick, which is about here.
Yeah, these were the 7 days, weren't they, from
Yeah.
2024?
Thank you, yes. I even put a little note on to explain the slides before I launched into them.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, but there were also some much better looking days, you know, red over the whole country, that didn't turn out to be very good at all.
True.
You know, RASP, we all know RASP is pretty bad at predicting cloud cover, for example.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's less important for the sailplane pilots. What's red for them isn't necessarily completely red for us. We have things like thermals being shredded by wind speed. They care less about that. And cloud cover as well. They can fly with, you know.
And of course it's changing as well. When Richard Carter did his presentation to us on the 300k flight that he did, he was, in his head, he was able to say, at 10 o'clock I'll be here, but at 12 o'clock I'll be here and RASP looks like this, and at 2 o'clock I'll be here and RASP looks like, and he predicted how RASP was changing during the day to where he wanted to be.
Yeah.
XC Para is really good for planning. You get RASP and then you can plot your flight through the day, through the day's RASP as it's changing out right now.
So yeah, absolutely classic to look for. This was southwesterly. This was the first opening slava of flights. And 2024 for me was just wind bank, and where do I end up today? I think I only did big cross countries from wind bank and maybe one from a place called World's End, but it's a northerly. There are no big distance prizes for northerlies in the Dales. Interesting day here. You know, we've got a metric shit ton of red to play with, and you'd think a day like that, fantastic. You know, book me fish and chips at Whitby. And there was a big hold up in the middle of that. We'll get to that later. It's worth looking at is that flight. And then there's other days. This was again was July 8th, a southerly. Actually was 100k in a triangle, not a distance flight. And you can see there it's pretty speckly. So there were obviously some big areas of shade out, possibly overdevelopment or maybe overcast development happening there. Gaggle. Does anybody not know that gaggling up is your best chance?
Dave used to tell me that it's cheating. Going in a gaggle is cheating.
It's cheating.
You can't go 100k by yourself,
it's
you're not a man, you know.
But I've just said, on the weather, just turn up when everybody else is. You know, when everybody else is getting excited, you need to be out. Because there's a reason that they're getting excited. So, with gaggling, there's etiquette. Okay? So, to help yourself out, you know, wait on your first climb. If you're at the top of your climb and you've still got rising air, wait until there's some people. Go with them. And regroup at base along the way, if you can. People are, you know, there's going to be all sorts of independent decisions made. You may lose people on glides. People might be a little off to the side, they may get more sink, and they, you know, 2 minutes later, they're scrabbling around just above a moor, trying to find something. So you are going to thin down, but take the time to regroup. I remember one from last year, it was super important, and by the time we were crossing Wensleydale, Pete Darwood and I were the only two gliders in the air. I think there was a gaggle after us, maybe there was a gaggle before us.
Tricky day.
Tricky day.
As it often is from Windbank.
From Windbank, I very luckily cross Wensleydale. I was kind of mid-height, got up to base. Pete was super low, waited for him. Pete returned the favour at Fremington Edge, so I just flew on to Fremington Edge. In fact, that is me below Pete, not having such a good glide. Mountain Bike Festival and competition on Fremington Edge, I got to enjoy that fairly close up for about 20 minutes, whilst Pete waited at base in what are good conditions. So you're not going to go down at Fremington. But back to the etiquette of gaggles. If you feel as though you're missing a decision, if nobody's particularly going up, if nobody has ideas, get on the radio. A decision has to be made because what you're doing is committee flying. And committee flying is going to keep you, going in some lifting air or some zeros at your 10k an hour. But equally, if the lift's gone, if nobody can search out and find that lift, then you're wasting time. And the afternoon march is on. And you've got that 4 hours in the afternoon. You may have launched at 1 p.m. and climbed out at 2 p.m, which means your 100k has to come between 2 and 6 p.m. The day's ticking on. So that's why we've got etiquette of not doing committee flying and people piping up and saying, should we be moving on? Because as a gaggle, the one thing that you've got is this advantage of not like in Star Wars where Bantha on Tatooine always follow each other to hide their numbers. Nobody a Star Wars fan? No? Okay. What you've got is the advantage of flying side by side. And flying side by side means that you're covering more ground that could have a thermal in it.
Yeah,
so that in parallel flying, or as parallel as you can manage, because somebody's always going to be 1 minute late to base, they're going to be off behind, but don't follow in line. Follow at the 4 o'clock, the 5 o'clock position, so you're scooping more out.
So how far apart? When you say side by side, that could be misunderstood.
So
I think you mean kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I did some maths the other day.
Just for fun.
Just for fun. And if you take your thumb with a bit of a glove on and hold it out like that, then that thumb, the height of your thumb, at arm's length, covers both the glider and the pilot below. Yeah? That glider is then roughly at 200 metres. Yeah? Give or take, 150 to 250.
If you're in a big gaggle, it's quite difficult to spread out, and if there's, say, 6 of you, the people on the outside fly a lot further, aren't they?
Yes.
So what's the crack there then?
What's the crack there?
Go first.
So, when I worked that out, it enabled me to do some more maths, and we're going to see that in a second. For Martin's sake, I will proceed quickly through this. But I had a chat with, I think it's the Czech guy, or Hungarian guy who does the weather articles in XC Mag. He was pretty insistent that any thermal was probably not going to be smaller than 100 metres in diameter. So, you know, give or take, it's pretty hard to fit a thermal and the air that's disturbed around it between two gliders that are more than 200 metres apart, or your thumb can cover them at that distance. Now, that sets up a tension, because if you're flying line abreast, side by side, somebody over there has got to get to the pilot's climb that they've just found here. Now, I'm here, I'm in the middle, I'm 20 seconds away. I fly 10, 11 metres a second. So I'm 20 seconds away from that climb. They're 40 seconds away from that climb. So this works out to about 4 gliders. There you go, I did some maths. Or I got the computer to do some maths. And what you're looking at here is down track. So that's 100 kilometres. And this is some hundreds of metres of line abreast, of side-by-side difference. Whereas that's down your 100 kilometres. This is altitude. So this represents a bunch of gliders setting off at base and then flying around. When I ran these computer simulations, they are stark. So if you tune the probability of a thermal happening and that imaginary glider hitting that thermal enough so that over 1,000 flights they make a 30k different distance on average, then if you throw 3 gliders at it, then at that same probability of thermals happening in that space, they never go down. They never go down until you turn the sun off. And that's the critical thing about gaggle flying. You've increased that finding area.
The search.
The search area.
Sample spaces.
Yeah. And therefore the probability of you making that one of Jake's next 10 kilometre sections just massively increased for the same amount of skill and for the same amount of luck with the weather and the conditions.
So to summarise, 200 metres.
Yeah.
And so if you get 6 gliders line abreast, one over there takes so long that the climb could very well have switched off.
Yeah, but this is where the order changes, because you know somebody who misses the thermal falls behind and beelines it to where the next thermal is that somebody else has found, and then catches up because then somebody else is searching.
Yeah.
So you've got to take it in turns to take the lead.
Yeah.
If you are 6 abreast as well, there's a good chance there might be 2 climbs. You might look at two sub-gaggles, and then you can almost decide which is the best out of the 2.
Yeah. But yeah, what I'm trying to get across is don't just follow somebody line abreast. Get yourself out 100, 200 metres.
Still doesn't answer my question. The people who are going on the wings, they're putting themselves at a disadvantage, aren't they? So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So about 4 is probably the maximum you want. When you think 4 at 200 metres apart, that's most of a kilometre apart.
Yeah.
It's quite a distance. So after 6, you were getting pilots landing in my simulation. But to be honest, in the Dales, 6 abreast, I can count on one hand the times that's happened. The important point that I've forgotten to mention, I just assumed, is as soon as one person is twitching, might have something here, folks. You're on the radio, and then people are going, and then they're watching you for that glider rock back. You might not even have to get on the radio, because people are looking at you, and you're looking for that rock back, and then a glider turns in, and then bang, you're on it. You are going for it, and you're on a substantial amount of speed bar, because the quicker you can get to their climb, the higher up in that climb you are.
And that's where it's good that you can
Yeah,
catch
sorry,
up.
I should have mentioned that point that everybody, is talking about the air that they're in.
Also, when you're on the glide, all the lines will be working slightly differently. So you might have, if there's 5 of you and you're all taking maybe 200 metres apart, one of you might just suddenly just start, you just watch them just sort of going up, and when you see that, you gravitate towards them. So everyone generally gravitates towards a better line. That makes an enormous difference in your glide ratios. That's almost as important, I think, as the actual catching the thermal.
Yeah.
So if that's happening, you abandon the sort of forward
Yeah,
rest.
you kind of start verging, and then generally what happens is someone will catch, will start. Someone will hit the edge of a thermal. They might not climb, but they might be in zero, might be going up a point. The air might be going up, but they're not going up just yet. And you can see that a mile off.
Yeah.
That's what we do all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, you just,
And the good thing about what we've just talked about is if you're behind, it gives you an opportunity to catch up because you can see these 4 pilots in front of you and you can head wherever whoever's doing the best.
yes, yeah.
If you're the weaker pilot in this gaggle, then you're in a really advantageous position.
Yeah.
Or being at the back.
You can sit there and you can see what the people who are doing research are doing. If you just sit, it's really, really obvious. That person on the right is in much better line over there. Oh look, they've hit thermal. I'm not going to carry on that way, I'm going to go to that. When you're flying along at the same level, you can see people in front of you.
Is that what
And you
tend
can
to
speed
do?
up
You-
as well.
You tend to fly at the same level.
Yeah,
Well, you leave it
because,
base, leave it
yeah,
base, yeah.
I mean, in that situation, because you're behind, and you've got that information up ahead of what's happening, and you can see somebody's advantaged over to one side, you can catch up with them because you can afford to fly faster because you know that good air is coming. You're not gambling by taking a sinky line. And the other part of thermal etiquette is, if you've got advantage in a thermal, if you're quite a bit higher, then spend some time searching, extend out. There are often better cores. Quite often cores are just merging and forming that funnel that goes to the cloud. But if you're low down in a group, then that searching can be super important. Foxtrot time, it's dancing time.
You can see how Pete's brain works, can't you? Well, maybe you can't.
To be very aware of the environment that you're flying through and what's coming up and what that means for your behaviour whilst you're flying. And guaranteed on a 100k flight from the Dales, this has to happen, because on every 100k flight from the Dales, you leave the Dales for lowland, or you get near the coast, or you get near airspace and you have to deviate. So what's happening there is that a change in situation needs to force a change in your behaviour. And with the Foxtrot here, it's slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Or quick, quick, slow, quick, quick.
Got it now.
Some permutation of that, because you're going to get changes in landscape, and changes in landscape, particularly coming out of the Dales. Every time you leave the Highland, you're going to get a depression in lift. You'll be lucky sometimes if you're flying over ground that is sloped towards the sun, that might help you. But if you're flying over ground where the air is being forced to descend down, everything in, you're going to conserve your height, you're going to hold on to light lift, because if this is your first 100k, if this is early on in your flying career, you're not worried about speed and the maximum, 160 in the day. You just make on the program, on the task of keeping yourself in the air. And if you're going to go through an area of depressed thermals, be conservative be slow, search, flat turns. Same goes for sun on the ground. So if you're going to come into an area where the cloud has been a bit mature, stuck around a bit, it's spread out, and that's shaded out the ground, and you can't go around that, then you're going to have to slow down, you're going to have to work out a way of either being more conservative or staying where you are. There are times, you know, that a couple of times last year, I think I was flying with Chris Fountain. We just headed on into a big old area in the Vale of York that was shaded out. There'll be something there. Well, you know, we're just going onwards, because onwards is the only way to go. If we'd have stayed where we were, that may have worked to our advantage, you know, because by the time we landed somewhere near Darlington, it was beginning to open up with the sky. You know, we were getting some more sun on the ground. So keep your mind open for that kind of change in the speed of your flying. And the converse is, if you've got the conditions, you know, if you're finding climbs that are strong, you know, by the time you've got down to 1,000 metres above the ground, and you're climbing 2, 3, 4 metres a second up to a 5,000, 6,000 foot base, when you get to cloud base, boot it. You have the conditions to work with that. Inversions are the same. And that flight I promised I'd talk to you about, the west-southwesterly from Hawkswick, that was going towards the East Coast. That was very much a case of slow, slow, quick, quick, slow.
What does a blue and what does a green represent?
So, takeoff is here,
Altitude.
wind bank. Blue is
Quite high.
cloud base, yeah. So you know, you're looking at it's wind bank, it's early, so you get a light blue. You know, you leave at 1,000, 15, well, 1,200 metres tops probably. And then once over the back of Great Whernside, you know, it gets quite high then, and the climbs are quite strong. I counted 6 or 7, Pete Morris, maybe Rob Cruikshank,
Jim Goldsborough.
Jim Goldsborough with you on the more northerly track,
Chris Fountain.
Joe, Chris Fountain, Dave Smart. So that was the gaggle. And, you know, we got out of the Dales pretty quickly and pretty confidently. You know, that last climb there, as we're, you know, over the 2 reservoirs, I don't really remember the name, but they're kind of near Massam. That was all pointing towards a super day.
Was that one of the 7 days on the previous?
It was, yeah. And then look what happens here. And, you know, thank God we were in a gaggle of 6, because we, you know, all of a sudden we got to Ripon. I think we turned down to Ripon because we're trying to avoid some max airspace. We're trying to thread below leaning. So that, you know, that was important to do. We had some height, so we took that decision to do it. And then all of a sudden we're in the flatlands, the Vale of York, and it's still inverted. The inversion hasn't broken. And it just put the anchors on our flying, and we're mincing about, and people are calling out 20 centimetre a minute or a second climbs. And we go across the whole of the Vale of York, and it probably took us an hour and a half, maybe more.
Just on the inversion line.
Just trying to get up to where the inversion is actually, you know, sort of capping us, and staying there. So, you know, fairly consistently, we were able to do that. There's 6 of us out searching. And, you know, Jake and Jim put in a sterling effort because 2 of them got across what is probably a little bit of a longer crossing. You know, because we were in the Highlands here well before Helmsley. You know, you left the Highlands there and got them back there, so...
It's a double whammy in the version because not only you're not getting very high, there's no clouds, so you can't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
where it's rainfall,
Yeah.
so you're flying blind.
Yeah.
So
That was the day you and Jim scared the shit out of RF Leeming as well, wasn't it? Because you
Oh,
were
yeah.
really close to the ATZ. Yeah,
I think 20 metres away.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's binary. It's you're in or you're out, you know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you see, by the time we're on somewhere near the White Horse, just coming back up into the Highlands of the North Yorks Moors, we get a bit of hope, and then, you know, I think the day was still to develop in the North Yorks Moors. And you know, I certainly struggled. I was within, you know, sort of 50 metres of hitting the deck by the time I got a climb out. And I only managed to get that climb out. I was with Rob Cruikshank. He went and gambled on going across a small valley and trying to get something into wind. I had a slightly different theory of air taking off from the spur that I was on, because rising air can never go down, so it has to take off. So end of a moor, if you're flying over the end of a moor as it's about to drop off, it's worth patrolling that edge to keep you in the air, to find that next climb. That's worked 2 or 3 times for me in the North Yorks Moors, because there's so many edges, there's so many black tops, and there's so many drop-offs. They're quite regular. And then by the time the sea breeze is starting to cause a bit of convergence, it's completely guaranteed. And then just a nice way to end the day at the cliff tops in Mosk, flying over Saltburn. But you know, quick, very slow again, and then almost guaranteed.
So you flew in a lot on the sea breeze?
Yeah. So Pete, I think when we both landed, I was landing with wind coming from here along the coast there. So I was going down the cliff edge at maybe 60, 70k speed over the ground, and then hook turn to land, you know, in flat laminar air, just on the fields on the cliff top. But that's a west-southwest day. You can see here, obviously we've deliberately turned south of the maps, carried on west-southwest, but by here, we're still going with the thermals, and you can see that the air's coming in from the east, and the whole flow has turned more northerly.
Yeah, we had a goal at Scarborough that day, but that was never going to happen once we got on the North York Moors, because it actually became quite reasonable southerly, didn't it?
Yeah. Do we all know slow, quick, slow? Right. I like to talk to myself in the air. So I do actually remind myself of these things. Kit, no rat holing here. You need an altimeter and a vario, and you need something comfy to spend 4 hours in. That's it. I don't care what it looks like. You know, people have been flying. Dean Crosby flew 100k in basically a converted parachute, Red Devil style, and you know, and
That day.
the most terrible piece of Charlie cast iron harnesses that they used to have back in the 90s.
So that flight we were just talking about, you were flying just an open harness, weren't you?
I use XC Trike, but you know, we can talk on 10 to 100 about the actual kit that you use. What's probably more important, always fly with the airspace instrument or your map or whatever. It's more important to have it in your head before you actually start on the task. For the simple reason that, if you're going for a wind bank, this is what you're heading into. And it's much more important that you start planning early for making an avoiding manoeuvre for a bit of airspace. So let's say Felderman Bellaby here. You will want to avoid that. So if you need to avoid it there, right below it, you have to fly, if it's 1k in front of you, basically you have to turn 90 degrees and fly 5k one way or the other to make it safely round. If you change Cloud Street 10k beforehand, your angular deviation is much smaller. And of course, because you've got 10k before you hit the airspace and 20k before you hit the airspace, you've got more time to make more right choices about the clouds that you actually go for. And therefore, much more likely to be successful in that choice. You can make the choice high up or low down, whereas if you're making the choice with 5 minutes to go before you hit the airspace,
that's kind of about...
God help you.
It's kind of more important to just plan it that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Draw the lines on your map before you set off and make sure you avoid those obstacles.
Yeah.
I think the point is you haven't got a choice if you left it to the last minute, have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't choose your clouds, you just have to go.
What do the grey dots represent, sorry?
Grey dots, things like drop zones, parachute drop zones. That's an avoid area. That's Fylingdale's early warning site. High intensity radio transmission antennae.
Yeah. Like the golf balls.
Yeah.
It's a simple one, isn't it?
Golf balls are their only reception, they're not transmission.
Okay.
So you can, at 500 feet, fly directly over the golf balls.
Try it.
Yeah.
I have.
But that one, the other one up there, Whitby Road, it's part of Whitby Road,
That transmits, yeah. They don't tell you when they do. I don't know if they're watching and I don't know if they turn it off. Now you see how my brain works. Okay, so foxholes, they're defensive positions. I have spent an entire flying career dropping off from perfectly acceptable climbs and positions and finding myself scrabbling around like a bottom feeder, like some skate or ray. What I do, and I think what every good pilot is always doing, even when you've got big advantages high up, is looking for the next bailout, the next edge, the next sort of piece of open water where the air might be triggering in front of it. So you're always looking for sources and triggers, of course, but in the mid-level, I'm still looking for where are my bailout points. If it all goes wrong and I just hit 3 down for 2 or 3 minutes, which happens, what bit of landscape am I going to survive on? Like a bottom feeder, and where am I going to reset to my takeoff brake? Because all you do, this is not a disaster that you've lost the gangway. It's not a disaster that you're back on a bit of ground again, so long as you can make that ground work for you. Because you've already taken off. The thermal conditions are perfectly acceptable for you to have travelled that far already. They're probably still perfectly acceptable to carry on as well. So, Sissy Bank, far side of Wensleydale, not too far from Redmire, I think. And you see me coming here at mid-height at 1240, and suddenly I'm in the yellows here. And it's a little higher than takeoff, but I'm on the ground, and I'm flying the quarry edge, and I take zeros out of there 43 minutes later. But it's a foxhole. I can live there. It's not enjoyable. It's a bit turbulent, but I'm still in the game for a flight.
The interesting thing is that if you'd taken off from there, you wouldn't have gone XC. But yeah, you were in the air, so you took what you had.
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. There are plenty of places where you wouldn't take off from, but it's still a soarable or a thermically triggering area that you're quite happy to live on. But you wouldn't think, oh, I'll go there as a takeoff because it's like, it's going to be brilliant. There's more areas that you can fly than there are actually acceptable takeoff sites.
Are you a bit close to the danger area in the one, Pete?
You'll notice how I kept my. I mean, here you can see what I was doing. I was going repeatedly out and back and out and back, and I'm trying to take these what tend to be there's a bit of a bubble, and then it's okay, but I've got a bit of height in that. Let's work it again. And you're looking at the trees. Which tree has the set of blackbirds just taken off from?
It always intrigues me with that danger area that, clearly what they've done is they've put a circle on the map because you can drive through that danger area, so it's perfectly safe to drive your car. I mean, the danger, it's a range area, so it's ricochets and bullets. You can drive through that area, but you can't fly through it. It's simply an approximation of the dangerous bit.
Yeah.
That if you're on the ground, there are flags, but of course you can't see those very well from the air.
And then another way to think of a foxhole is, even on, you can see here from the fields, it's pretty flat landscape. But I don't. Hopefully you can see it. There's a river. It goes through there. I think it's maybe the Weir. Pierce Bridge
could be.
is probably on the Weir. But you can see me, and I haven't got a lot of time here, but it's still a foxhole. So I'm still descending as I come to the river. And you can see my wiggly line here. I'm circling, I'm trying to circle in something, and I'm going down whilst I'm circling, but I know that air is trying to lift. But of course it can't, it's not minded to lift because it's just being pushed along. There's nowhere for it to trigger. And of course, as we go north, we go back up the hill.
Yeah, just to go in. So that circling whilst going down, if you're going down at less than roughly 1.5 metres a second, the air is actually going up. Because you're going, so in still in really round numbers, you're going down at 1.5 metres a second. So if you're going down at less than 1.5, you're in some kind of rising air. And so like Pete said there, circling in whilst going down kind of is counterintuitive. But if you're desperate, you're just slowing down how quickly you're going down.
Yeah, that's a foxhole that's going to last 5 minutes at best, but as the wind takes you towards that other side of the valley that does start to rise, there's some hope, so stick with it. This is thermal hotspotting. Maybe I just put this photograph in or this map in to show you that even in sort of relatively average undulating land, there's still thermals that have historically happened there, and therefore those are probably sources and trigger pairs themselves. I think that's probably why I put it in. Right, last one before the beer break, so we're going to accelerate. I need to keep my head screwed on when I'm flying. I mean, lovely, it's enjoyable, I feel like I'm at home. But I do have to remind myself what I'm doing. And I do have to put some effort into making sure that my situational awareness, my orientation of where I'm going, where's the wind, where's everybody else, where's the sources and triggers, where's that piece of general aviation, where are the gliders that I'm looking at in the gaggle ahead, how have they changed? All of that takes a lot of effort, and all of that is feeding you a tremendous amount of information that's helpful. So I've got orientation and awareness, and one of the ways that I do that is, you know, when there's a visual marker that I can remember that comes into field, I'll use that for orientation, for spatial orientation. You know, so the A1 is great for that. You will come out of the Dales in a southwesterly and you're heading towards something in the mist over there, and it looks like a city. Is it Newcastle? Is it Darlington? Is it, what is it? You know, it's not guaranteed that you've got the best visibility over the flatlands, and it probably doesn't mean that you're going to fly off in 180 degrees the wrong direction because you just come from the Dales. Okay, so that's Highland over there. But it does mean that if you're on your own, you can be 45 degrees out. So it's tremendously helpful, you know, 10 to 100 club. I hope, you know, people are going to be sharing tasks and you've got an arrow to follow. That's helpful. But one of the things I do is a visual marker somewhere near or on the horizon. And I'm using that for orientation to fly to. I'm also using that for how long my thermals are taking. Is it 16, 18 seconds in the turn? And then the other thing that's pretty important is keeping an eye on birds and other gliders. And the way that I do that is I don't actually try and reacquire that spot that I was looking at before. I remember what the background was as I was looking at it, the general lie of the field, or the lake, or a small piece of town, or a small piece of cloud. Remember the background. It's easier, you will get the background very quickly. You do that when you're driving. You've been doing that for 10, 20, 30 years. Then acquiring and seeing the change of where that glider was in relation to the cloud above, below, is the quicker way of maintaining that awareness. And then I'm quite happy to talk to myself as I'm wandering around in the sky.
Why does that not surprise us?
Do you actually take notes then?
I do take notes, yeah. So you'll see here, I'm flying in Brazil a few short months ago, and I've got a bunch of notes here. But so notes and talking. You've got to keep some things front of mind, and it was really important front of mind late on in flights in Brazil, just to keep myself out of the sun, because you know you ruin your next day if you're completely sunburned, and the sun, you're flying into a sunset for hours and hours. So that was important just to have written down, because I can't remember things.
I often talk to myself if I've got a decision to make, you know, and I'll say it out loud so that even if it goes wrong and I end up landing, I know that I've sort of properly thought through the decision that I'm making.
Yeah, and confidence as well. You know, I mean, I occasionally take a flutter. I had a couple of flutters in Brazil, and it's all right, Pete. Simmer down. What's my next task? You know, we've got through that. Keep an eye on that leading edge. Be ready with your legs coming in, because we're in this little bit of a turbulent area. but let's press on. What's the next task? Get your confidence back.
Yeah, the trick is not to press your presser while you're talking to yourself, isn't it? It's a bit embarrassing.
Absolutely, yes.